なたのすべてが好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ好きよ一番好きよ
Urusei Yatsura Reborn, Episode 20, Ataru in Trouble, Oyuki's Passion Unleashed. The city of Tomobiki was covered by an enormous blanket of snow. It had snowed throughout the entire night, but finally, the storm had ended. The first rays of sunlight were beginning to break through the clouds, revealing small patches of a beautiful blue sky. After several days spent cooped up in their homes, the residents of Tomobiki were beginning to venture outside again. Some were clearing snow from their entrances, others were cleaning their cars, and some were simply walking through the streets, enjoying the return of good weather. The Moroboshi family home still showed the consequences of the previous day's events. The house had been practically destroyed, and although the electricity had already been restored, there were still planks covering some of the windows to keep the cold air out. In the kitchen, Mrs. Moroboshi was washing a huge number of pots. Meanwhile, in the living room, Shinobu and Lum were tidying up the room and getting the television and the kotatsu ready. Quickly, Shinobu! Space Princess is about to start! Lum came running in with a tray full of cookies and tea and placed it on the kotatsu. Shinobu settled herself underneath the table, still trying to warm up. The episode began on the screen. The Space Princess appeared walking through a beautiful grove of cherry blossom trees, accompanied by her boyfriend. "Oh, she looks so pretty!" Shinobu said. Then she looked at a cookie she was holding. While me, all I've done during all these days is gain weight. She discreetly felt one of the rolls around her hips, looked at the cookie again, turned it over on both sides, and finally put it into her mouth. "How I envy you, Lum. You eat everything you want and you still look exactly the same." Lum continued watching the television while stuffing enormous amounts of cookies into her mouth. Then she looked at Shinobu and smiled. "I suppose it's my metabolism." Lum took another cookie. "By shooting lightning and moving around constantly, I suppose I burn more calories, although I think I've also lost some of my physical condition." Shinobu looked at her curiously. "And what do you plan to do?" "When Ataru finishes removing the snow from my flying saucer and manages to free it, I'll go inside and get some exercise machines." "Exercise machines?" "Yes, I think I'll bring them into our bedroom." Lum sighed. "I've been way too lazy these past few days. Ever since I've been living with you, all I've done is eat." Meanwhile, outside the house, Ataru was removing snow from the entrance, and of course, he was not happy about it at all. "What a punishment. Lum destroys the power grid, nearly burns down the house, and I end up removing snow." He slammed the shovel against the ground, as if it were my fault that it snowed. Suddenly, he heard some voices approaching. Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi appeared down the street. Megane looked at Ataru and opened his eyes in surprise. Well, what do we have here?" Perm smiled. "The one and only Ataru Moroboshi working." Chibi burst out laughing. "This is a miracle," Kakugari added. "Maybe that's why it snowed." The four of them began to laugh. Ataru looked at them with an annoyed expression. "Lucky me, I always have to run into the biggest idiots in school." The boys laughed again. "But speaking of idiots, nobody beats the one and only Ataru Moroboshi. Ha ha ha." Ataru clenched his teeth. "Don't you have anything better to do than bother me?" "Of course not." The boys began walking away. "Good luck with the snow." "Yeah, good luck with the snow." Ataru imitated them with a grimace. "Good luck with the snow." He threw the shovel onto the ground. What a pain! At that moment, an enormous shadow completely covered Ataru. The boy looked up. Floating above him was a gigantic flying saucer. It was almost as large as Lum's ship. The vessel was completely white with gray shadows, curved raised details, and small lights of different colors. Suddenly, an intense light enveloped Ataru, and his body began slowly rising into the air. "They're kidnapping me!" Ataru desperately waved his arms. "Help!" He tried to throw the shovel at the ship, but it fell uselessly onto the snow. An opening resembling the lens of an enormous camera appeared on the underside of the saucer. The opening closed around Ataru and absorbed him. An instant later, the ship rapidly ascended and disappeared among the clouds. Inside the house, Lum raised her head. "Shinobu, did you hear something?" "What?" Lum froze. A small electrical sensation ran through her horns. Ah! She suddenly sprang to her feet. It's Ataru! Lum ran toward the door. Shinobu followed right behind her. Where's Ataru? Lum opened the door. There was no one outside anymore. Only Ataru's footprints remained in the snow, but the footprints suddenly came to an end. Lum crouched down and picked something up. It was a scarf. Shinobu approached her. What's that? Lum held it between her hands, and her expression changed completely. It's Darling's scarf. Shinobu looked at the vanished footprints. Do you think he was kidnapped? Lum pressed the scarf against her chest. Yes. She looked toward the sky. And I intend to find out who did it. Inside the Moroboshi house, Lum and Shinobu were discussing the situation anxiously. But what the hell happened to Ataru? We can't just sit around with our arms crossed while we don't know what happened to him. At that moment, Mrs. Moroboshi approached them. What happened? Shinobu looked at her worriedly. Mrs. Moroboshi, your son has been kidnapped. Ataru's mother crossed her arms angrily. What a disaster we've gotten ourselves into. She said it with a sigh. That boy does nothing but get himself into trouble. I'm sure some aliens kidnapped him to demand a ransom. Then she let out a small laugh. Ha! But they picked the wrong family. Shinobu looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? After paying the fine for burning down the neighborhood transformer, we don't have a single cent left. Mrs. Moroboshi shrugged. As far as I'm concerned, the kidnappers can keep Ataru. Shinobu was left completely perplexed. But Mrs. Moroboshi, Lum had already gotten to her feet. I'm gonna solve this right now. Lum ran toward the back of the house. Shinobu looked at Mrs. Moroboshi and tried to reassure her. Don't worry, Mrs. Moroboshi. I'm sure Lum will bring some extraterrestrial, ultra-high-tech, futuristic gadget that will allow us to find Ataru. At that moment, Lum appeared from the back of the house. Shinobu looked at her, hopefully. Did you find him? Exactly. Here he is. Lum handed Shinobu a shovel while carrying another one in her own hands. Shinobu looked at her in complete bewilderment. This is for clearing the snow off the flying saucer. Otherwise, we can't get inside. A short while later, the two of them were outside, clearing snow from Lum's enormous flying saucer. The task was much more difficult than they had imagined. At that moment, Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi appeared down the street. They were returning from the arcades where they had spent a good part of the afternoon. When they saw the girls working in the snow, they stopped. Hey girls, do you need some help? Lum raised her head. Yes. Lum handed them several shovels. The four boys looked at one another. Of course, Lum. It will be our pleasure to help you. And so the six of them began clearing the snow from the enormous flying saucer. After quite some time working, they finally managed to free the ship. Lum opened the entrance, and at last all six of them entered the saucer. As soon as they were inside, Shinobu was amazed. Oh, it's beautiful. She looked around. The interior was filled with glowing panels, screens, controls, and strange futuristic-looking devices. I love the retro-futuristic style of the interior of your flying saucer. Lum looked at her in surprise. Retro? Shinobu thought for a moment. Well, yes. Lum looked at her own controls. You think it looks retro? Shinobu smiled awkwardly. At that moment, someone switched on one of the systems, and the screens began to light up. Everyone gathered around. Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi stared in fascination at the extraterrestrial technology. One of the screens immediately displayed a warning. Lum stepped closer. I have an unauthorized registration in the planet's orbit. Her expression changed. Damn it. Shinobu stepped closer. Is it someone you know? Lum watched the image appearing on the screen and recognized it immediately. I know that ship perfectly well. Lum pointed at the screen. It's Oyuki. A few minutes later, Shinobu looked at the screen again. Oyuki, like the princess from the legends, the Snow Princess. Lum looked at her in surprise. That's interesting. Something like that. Lum pressed a button. The face of a beautiful young woman appeared on the screen. She had light-colored eyes, skin as white as marble, and a deep, serious gaze. Her long hair, almost white like snow, was gathered into an elegant bun adorned with diamonds. She was an astonishing beauty. She's beautiful, Lum said. Oyuki wore a long, traditional-style robe that hinted at her immense status and importance. The boys were completely mesmerized. She's beautiful, Shinobu said. Lum crossed her arms. And she's also terrifying. Everyone looked at her. She is one of the coldest, most calculating, and ruthless beings in the entire galaxy. The atmosphere changed immediately. A few months ago, she took possession of one of Neptune's moons and established her center of operations there. Lum pointed at the screen. She's probably looking for male specimens for who knows what kind of experiments. The boys swallowed nervously. You never know. Lum clenched her fists. But if she's done anything to Darling, I won't forgive her. Then she added, with a serious expression, it is said that with her powers, she can hypnotize men and subjugate them to her cold will of steel without mercy. Many have been lost to her charms. Everyone was even more astonished. Then Lum smiled. And she's also my best friend. Everyone was completely bewildered. Your best friend? Megane looked at her in disbelief. What a friend you've got. Lum simply smiled. At that moment, everyone committed to accompanying Lum and Shinobu to Neptune. We won't let that idiot keep all the girls to himself, Megane said. Perm looked at him strangely. What did you say? Megane thought for a moment. Sorry. I mean, we won't allow Ataru to be kidnapped by the Snow Princess, no matter that she's one of our dear Lum's best friends. Lum smiled. Ah, perfect, boys. Thank you very much. Lum pointed toward the seats. Take your seats. It will be a long journey. Everyone settled into their seats. Lum took the controls and lowered a lever. Light speed. Immediately, the blue sky of Earth disappeared. Through the windows, the stars began streaking past at a dizzying speed. The enormous acceleration slammed everyone against the backs of their seats. Megane, Perm, Kakugari, Chibi, and Shinobu were completely flattened against them. But only a few seconds had passed when Lum moved the lever again. The ship braked abruptly, sending everyone flying forward. What happened? Shinobu asked. Lum calmly looked at the controls. We're here. Everyone stared out the windows, completely astonished. Shinobu looked at Lum. That's what you call a long journey? Lum smiled somewhat sheepishly. Yes, sorry. It's just that there was some traffic. Shinobu looked at her in silence. Behind the windows stretched an enormous jade-colored planet covered by dense white clouds. Lum pointed outside. We've arrived. Then she added, this is the place. At that very moment, a formation of flying saucers surrounded Lum's ship. On one of the screens, the beautiful face of the Princess of Neptune appeared once again. Welcome to Neptune. Oyuki smiled faintly. It is a pleasure to see you again, Lum. Please allow us to escort you to my palace. Immediately, the formation of ships began escorting Lum's saucer through the layers of the planet's atmosphere. Shortly afterward, they descended onto an enormous crystal platform. Behind it stretched an impressive city of sapphire-colored palaces and enormous jade crystal structures. Everyone was left speechless by the beauty of the place. When they stepped out of the saucer, they were greeted by Oyuki's ladies-in-waiting. They were beautiful young women with an almost Scandinavian appearance, delicate features, upturned noses, very fair skin, and long hair in shades that were almost white. Their light-colored eyes stood out beneath Neptune's strange light. Their elegant robes revealed the beauty of their figures and the distinction of their bearing. Suddenly, they all stepped aside. In the distance, Oyuki appeared, accompanied by her ladies-in-waiting. Lum, welcome. It's wonderful to see you again. Lum approached. The two girls took each other's hands and looked at one another with a smile. Despite Oyuki's usual coldness and elegance, a faint smile escaped across her face. Lum floated slightly as she held her hands. It's wonderful to see you, Yuki. Then her expression changed. We've come for Ataru. What have you done with him? Oyuki looked at her calmly. Nothing. He's perfectly fine. He's in the palace. Oyuki gestured for them to follow. Come with us. We'll show you where he is. Shinobu, Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi looked at one another, completely perplexed by the unreality of the whole situation. Then they began moving along an enormous ramp toward the palace. All around them walked that extraordinary procession from Neptune, and none of them could stop wondering what the hell Ataru could possibly be doing in a place like this. Once inside the palace, and much to everyone's surprise, they discovered Ataru in a beautiful garden beside the entrance. The boy was running after several of Oyuki's young ladies while they laughed and seemed to be enjoying his antics. Come here. Don't run away. Beautiful princess. I'm gonna catch you. Ha ha ha. No, you won't. Got you. Oh, he got me. He got me. And now what are you going to do to me, you naughty boy? Lum stared at him for several seconds, and her expression changed completely. Ataru, we're all worried about you, and you're playing with these girls. Lum rose above the group. A bolt of electricity struck Ataru and left him sprawled on the ground. The boy writhed for a few moments. Then Shinobu, Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi pounced on him and began kicking him together. Oyuki and her ladies-in-waiting watched the scene in complete bewilderment. Oyuki calmly observed the situation. My! A faint smile appeared on her face. How amusing! As always, Lum, as spontaneous and charismatic as ever. Then she turned toward her guests. Please, come with us. We've prepared a dinner that I hope you will enjoy as a welcome to our planet. Oyuki made an elegant gesture toward the interior of the palace. Inside the palace, the dinner was truly splendid. There were all kinds of meats, wines, salads, and fruits, while a group of young women played strange musical instruments, laser harps, exotic water drums, and curious percussion instruments resembling xylophones. Ataru was seated between Lum and Shinobu, as if, rather than a guest, he were a prisoner. He glanced at the beautiful young women surrounding them, but he could not approach any of them without immediately encountering the watchful looks of Lum and Shinobu. Meanwhile, Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi were thoroughly enjoying the hospitality of their hosts. The girls laughed with them, flirted with them, shared the food, and even fed them while joking around. At the center of the table, facing everyone, sat Oyuki, observing the situation with her customary calm. And what do you think of our planet? Shinobu answered delightedly. It's truly beautiful. I never thought something like this could exist in the solar system, apart from Earth. Oyuki nodded. We arrived a few months ago and transformed the planet to turn it into our center of operations. She looked around. However, as you can see, we're only a colony of girls, and it can get a little boring over time. Lum slammed her hand against the table and stood up. Is that why you kidnapped Ataru? Oyuki looked at her calmly. I want to apologize to you, Lum, for taking him without your consent. She made a small bow. We knew that you had found a boy on Earth and that you had become engaged to him. I wanted to know why he was so special. I wanted to discover for myself what had attracted you so much to that human. Oyuki looked toward Ataru. And I see that I was not mistaken. Lum frowned. I hope you haven't done anything to him. No, not at all. He's intact. As she said this, Shinobu discreetly twisted Ataru's arm. Enough, Shinobu. Enough! Ataru tried to pull away. Nothing happened. Leave me alone. Oyuki continued speaking with complete calm. As you can imagine, we were created through processes of bioengineering and cloning. With these methods, we populated the entire moon. Oyuki paused. However, our life here tends to be quite boring. Her gaze became somewhat more melancholy, and I wanted to find out for myself what that thing you call love was all about. Megane smiled and began nudging Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi with his elbows. We know a lot about that subject. The four of them smiled proudly. We can teach you. The boys began hitting each other, boasting like genuine Casanovas. Shinobu looked at them in complete disbelief. Wow, all men are pigs. The young women from Neptune exchanged glances. One of them smiled. It will be our pleasure to welcome you. We are eager to learn everything you can teach us. Lum slammed her hand against the table again. I'm not responsible for those boys. She pointed at Ataru. But as far as Ataru is concerned, he belongs to me. Shinobu immediately intervened. Exactly. Ataru belongs to us, and we won't allow you to use him as a guinea pig for your experiments. Oyuki smiled. I would never do something like that, Lum, without your consent. You know that I respect you very much. Lum nodded. I trust you, Oyuki, but the one I don't trust is my horny boyfriend. Ataru smiled nervously. Oyuki spoke again. Life in these colonies can be very cold and boring for a girl my age who still doesn't know love. For the first time, her expression showed a certain sadness. I often feel very lonely. Oyuki looked at Lum. When I heard the news that you had found a human on Earth and that you were living with him, I felt a little jealous. She paused briefly. I wanted to meet him and discover what it was that had attracted you so much to that human. Ataru intervened. Oyuki, you can't kidnap a person. The princess looked at him. Believe me, I understand what it means to be alone and trapped in one place for a long time, but you can't simply kidnap someone and force them to love you. Ataru shook his head. That's not how it works. At that moment, Oyuki brought a hand to her face. "Ooh, it's hot in here," she said, looking at her attendants. "Would you mind if I made myself a little more comfortable?" Oyuki stood up. Two of her attendants approached and carefully removed her long robe, revealing an elegant one-piece spacesuit that showed off her sculpted, well-proportioned figure, with a narrow waist and broad hips that curved gently into a prominent, sculpted rear as though it had been carved from marble. Her firm, shapely legs extended like solid pillars, completing her imposing silhouette. The boys were completely astonished. Oyuki smiled playfully and looked directly at Ataru. "Were you saying something, Ataru?" Ataru immediately regained his enthusiasm. "Beautiful, Oyuki. I'd be more than happy to teach you everything you need to know about the mysteries of love." He smiled. "I'd be delighted to be your guide and your most devoted servant." Oyuki smiled as Ataru gazed at her with his eyes bulging and his mouth hanging open, until a drop of saliva finally fell onto the table. "Oh, what lovely things you say." At that moment, Ataru was struck once by Lum and once by Shinobu. The boy collapsed unconscious onto the table. After dinner, a group of young women led Lum, Shinobu, and Ataru to their quarters. It was a beautiful room decorated with large crystal chandeliers. From the enormous windows, an extraordinary landscape could be seen. In the distance stood enormous ivory towers, and beyond them, imposing mountains of gleaming metal. Above them stretched an almost psychedelic sky. Several of Neptune's moons filled the heavens, each displaying nearly indescribable colors: pinks, magentas, purples, and bluish tones, all beneath a sky of deep violet. Shinobu gazed at the landscape in wonder. "How beautiful!" She smiled. "Everything has been wonderful." Lum, on the other hand, was still reprimanding Ataru. "How can you be so irresponsible? You don't know what Oyuki is capable of." A short while later, Ataru, Lum, and Shinobu were arguing once again inside the room. "How can you be such a pervert? You have two girls right here, and you still keep looking at other women." "It's incredible." Shinobu glared at him. Ataru looked at her irritably. "I never asked to be with you two. Basically, you forced yourselves on me." Lum opened her eyes in indignation. "Now you're going to pretend that we've been forcing you all this time? What a pig you are. We won't let you run off with Oyuki. She's my friend, and I won't let you ruin our friendship." Ataru immediately replied, "Oh, but you don't have any problem welcoming your idiot ex-boyfriend onto your flying saucer." Lum became furious. "I never welcomed him. He got in by himself." Ataru turned toward Shinobu. "And you had no problem going out to dinner with that stuck-up Mendo, even though I'd forbidden you to do it in every possible way." Shinobu looked at him indignantly. "How dare you?" The three of them began struggling with each other again. Ataru ended up rolling across the carpets until he was completely tangled up. "Enough!" He finally managed to get back on his feet and dusted off his clothes. "I need some fresh air. This place has already become suffocating." "The only suffocating thing here is you, Ataru. Where are you going? Come back here." Ataru ran down the hallway. Lum and Shinobu chased after him, but when they turned a corner, they found that he had completely disappeared. Lum stopped and pulled a small tracking device out of her bra. Shinobu looked at her. "Is that the device for tracking Ataru?" "Exactly." Lum looked at the screen, and her expression changed. "What is it?" "It seems Oyuki has a signal-blocking system installed that prevents tracking devices from being used inside her palace." Shinobu clenched her teeth. "So now that pig could be anywhere, getting into trouble." Lum put the device away. "We have to find him before he does something stupid." The two began walking through the enormous corridors of the palace. As they moved along, Ataru remained hidden behind some enormous decorative porcelain vases. The girls walked right past him without noticing. Ataru waited a few seconds, stepped out of his hiding place, and dusted off his clothes again. Then he continued down the corridors. Eventually, he reached one of the main rooms. It was one of Oyuki's private chambers. The princess was standing in front of a mirror, calmly brushing her long hair. Ataru slowly opened the door. Oyuki saw him reflected in the mirror. "Oh, Ataru, it's you. It's good to see you." She turned toward him and took his hands. Ataru smiled. "Oh, Oyuki, you're so beautiful. I've never met a woman like you in my life." Oyuki looked at him curiously. "But you have Lum and Shinobu." "Yes, that's true." Ataru gently squeezed her hands. "But neither of them could compare to your beauty." It would be like comparing a simple reflection to the sun. You are like a sun radiating your beauty and outshining them all. Oyuki smiled. Oh, Ataru, what lovely things you say. As Ataru continued holding her hands, the two of them ended up falling onto Oyuki's enormous bed. Ataru was on top of Oyuki, smiling as he caressed and kissed her. Oyuki smiled, placed her hands on his chest and rolled over, leaving Ataru underneath her. With a single pull, Oyuki tore his shirt open and with a feline gaze, trapped him between her legs. At that moment, for the first time, Ataru realized that he was facing a woman he could not overpower, while Oyuki smiled with an insatiable look of superiority. A few moments later, the door exploded in a shower of splinters. Ataru, what are you doing? Lum entered furiously, followed by Shinobu. You're a pig! Shinobu shouted. We knew you were doing something stupid, but we never thought you'd go this far. Lum pointed toward Ataru. Come here. Ataru stepped backward. Oyuki, I'll see you later. Oyuki simply smiled. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Ataru. Perhaps another time. Lum and Shinobu grabbed Ataru by the ears and began dragging him down the hallway. Back on Earth, Ataru, Lum, and Shinobu were sitting peacefully under the kotatsu watching a new episode of Space Princess. Lum could also see her flying saucer through the window. Suddenly, Shinobu looked at the others. Don't you feel like we forgot something? The scene immediately changed. Somewhere on Neptune, Megane, Perm, Kakugari, and Chibi were walking down a corridor. They were completely exhausted, with sunken eyes and gaunt faces. We can't take it anymore. We're doomed. We won't survive another day here. The four of them could barely remain standing. Then, a group of young Neptunian women appeared behind them, laughing cheerfully. The girls, dressed in their elegant white robes with their long fair hair, grabbed them and began dragging them back inside once again. The door closed.